What's the Wi-Fi code here? Morning, members. I'll start the meeting when we hit 10 o'clock. I think you're aware, well, you'll be aware that we'll need the first item will be the election of a chair, but I'll steer us through. Good morning, members. I'd like to start by welcoming those members of the public and press who've joined us today at New Shire Hall, and those who are watching the meeting on our live stream. We've had apologies today from the Mayor of the Combined Authority, Mayor Dr. Nick Johnson. I'll move on to the first item, which will be the election of a chair. I'll just complete some housekeeping announcements first. I'll just complete those announcements and then take your question, Councillor Hiller. So the Combined Authority allows filming and photography at its public meetings, so please feel free to take pictures and tweets during the meeting. Could I ask that everyone present turns their mobile phones to silent or vibrate whilst the meeting is taking place? The meeting room has been arranged to comply with public health guidance on COVID safety. On their advice, committee members and officers will remove their face coverings at the start of the meeting and replace them at the end. This is to minimise the number of hand-to-face contacts. And could I ask members of the public who may be in attendance, see that there aren't any at the moment, and press to keep their masks on. Members and officers, please be reminded that today's meeting is recorded. Councillor Hiller, I noted that your hand was up.
Thank you. It was just to make a proposal for chair. I'm sorry. I probably jumped again.
Not at all. Thank you. So first item in the absence of the Mayor as chair is by the standing orders to appoint a chair, and the committee appoints the chair. So could I ask for nominations for the role of chair for today's meeting? Councillor Hiller.
Thank you. I propose Councillor Niche to be the chair.
Any other nominations or a seconder? Councillor Seaton.
Yes, I would like to second that nomination.
Thank you, Councillor Seaton. I see no other hands up to make other nominations. May I take that as a unanimous or a vote? Yes, I don't detect any demurral, so yeah, all agreed. Councillor Niche, welcome, and please be seated at the top of the table. We have a mayor's script, chair script, in fact, but I'm happy to steer you through at any stage. Got any questions? Whilst Councillor Niche is taking his chair, I'll just like to note to the committee and those watching that Councillor Thornborough is also given apologies today, and we have Councillor Councillor Richard Robertson as sub. Welcome.
Thank you, members. Wasn't expecting to do this, so you'll have to bear with me. Thank you very much. The first thing we have to do is, first of all, we've already had the welcome to members of the public and press who have joined us. We've had the filming, which you've already mentioned, and we're aware of the public health requirements. So I welcome you all to this this meeting of the Transport and Infrastructure Committee. And as I said earlier, please bear with me, and we'll see how we get on. Have you got any apologies for absence, please?
Thank you, Chair. So just to reiterate, we've got apologies obviously from the Chair, Mayor Dr. Nick Johnson, and also apologies from Councillor Thornborough, who's replaced today by Councillor Robertson.
Thank you. And does any member wish to declare any disclosure of pecuniary interests or non-statutory disclosure of interests at this point? I take that as a no. So moving on to the agenda. Item 1.2 is the approval of the minutes of the meeting of the 8th of November 2021. We're being asked to confirm that these are an accurate record, and if any member wishes to raise a question on accuracy of the minutes only, can you indicate now? Is it Councillor Robertson, is it?
Fine, okay, the non-button. Sorry to interrupt. As you gather, I'm Richard Robertson, the Councillor for Cambridge City. I would be grateful if I could understand who everybody is and where they come from, because I've not come to this committee before. Thank you.
That's fine, thank you. Welcome. I'm John Nish. I'm Huntingdonshire District Council on this committee, and if we start going round, we'll start with officers as well, if I may. If we just go round this way, if that's easier.
Yes, good morning. I'm Roland Potter and I'm Head of Transport for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority.
Good morning, I'm Robert Parkin, the Monitoring Officer of the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority.
Neil Shaler from the Cambridgeshire County Council. I'm also on the Highways Committee.
I'm Neil Goff from South Cambs District Council.
Hello, I'm Anna Graham. I'm a Transport Programme Manager within the Transport team, and I'm presenting one of the papers today.
Councillor Peter Hiller from Peterborough City Council.
Councillor Chris Seaton from Fenton District Council.
Daniel Snowden, Democratic Services.
Thank you, and welcome again. So if I've got it correctly, we're now on to 1.3, the forward plan. First of all, do the committee have any comments on the Combined Authority forward plan? I can see no indications, so I accept that the forward plan we're all happy with.
Chair, could I just quickly, I think
Certainly.
it was the case, but just Councillor Robertson put a question in on the last item, but I think we take it as confirmed that the minutes are confirmed. Yes, thank you. So just jumping back, thank you.
Thank you very much. 1.4. This is public questions. We've received one question from a Mr. Sean Finley, who I understand is not going to read the question out. And we're going to have the question read out now. Thank you.
So the question is as follows. Can we ensure that a bridge for walkers, cyclists, etc. is included in the plans for Broad End Road roundabout?
I'm happy to read the response, Chair. So the response is that there is no segregated walking cycling provision within the current design, which is being finalised for potential future funding availability. It is noted, however, that segregated cycling and walking should be considered if and when funding becomes available and the current design is reviewed prior to construction.
Thank you very much for that response. So we're on part 2 now for delivery. The first item we have on 2.1, which is pages 51 to 56, which is the Fengate Access Study. And could I now ask Emma White, the Principal Transport Planner, to introduce this report?
Hi all, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you very much.
Right. Good morning, members. I'm presenting a paper on the Fengate Access Study. The recommendations are to A, approve the drawdown of 150,000 to complete the full business case stage of the project. B, approve the slippage of the remaining in-year subject to approval budget, and note the need for a further reprofile exercise once the revised project timeframe is established in January. In summary, the purpose of the Fengate Access Study is a package of schemes that will add capacity to the highway network, addressing existing problems of congestion and help to facilitate planned employment growth within Fengate. At the November 2020 board, the completed strategic outline business case was noted and the commencement of the full business case and detailed design stage was approved. During the full business case and detailed design programme, additional highway design work is required. Peterborough City Council recognised this early on and were able to secure 175,000 of their own funding to support this project. However, an additional 150,000 is needed and is being requested from the CPCA. As the designs progressed and in light of the public consultation that was undertaken, there was a need to put in more non-motorised user infrastructure and additional pedestrian improvements. As well as the complexity of several of the schemes has increased due to a range of factors, including LTM 120, stat searches and surveys, developer engagement and changes, increased input into the environmental works and an archaeological watching brief due to the proximity of Flag Fen. Therefore, to conclude, the recommendations are to A, approve the drawdown of 150,000 to complete the full business case stage of the project, and B, approve the slippage of the remaining in-year subject to approval budget, and note the need for further reprofile exercise once the revised project timeframe is established in January. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emma. So the first one is, would any members of the committee wishing to ask any questions on the actual aspects of the reports asked now? And if not, then we can go on to committee questions. Sorry, mic went off. Councillor Hiller.
It wasn't a question, Chair. It was a commentary more than anything.
Fine, I think we can move on to the commentary.
If that's okay, Chair, thank you. And thank you for the comprehensive summary. This is important for Peterborough. I guess you probably expect me to say that, but it is important for Peterborough. Fengate, for anybody that knows Peterborough and the lie of the land around this area, Boongate, Fengate, going through to the other side of this industrial area, it's extremely important that it is made more accessible for the people that work there, the people that travel through there, for the future growth of this area, and for employment prospects. It will help. It is design access at this stage. We are improving the walking and cycling facilities through the Fengate area, and I would just recommend that committee is supportive and recommended to the Combined Authority Board. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hiller. Anybody else have any comments or questions? Thank you, Councillor.
Just a brief one. I'm under no doubt that the transport infrastructure in the area does need upgrading from my small knowledge. My worry is only that it seems to be very heavily slanted towards more cars, and I wonder if this is an opportunity to put in more public transport infrastructure. There's good train links not too far away from the area. I do note that the active transport is going to be upgraded, but on a much more moderate level than provision for cars, and I wonder if anybody with more knowledge than myself could comment.
Thank you, Councillor Shayler. Before I come back to Councillor Hiller, I think I'll ask Mr. Roland Potter to confirm some of the questions that were put there about cars.
Yeah, I'm very happy to respond to that. As I've said in other meetings, we are in a transition period from where we were when most of these business cases started, and where our ambition is now through the changes of increased attention on sustainability and active travel and environmental, etc. As Councillor Hill has said, this is a very vital employment and economic growth area for Peterborough. And when the business case started off, there was very much a focus on the highways aspects and highways connectivity. I don't deny that. But Emma and others have been working very closely with the officers at Peterborough to ensure, and this is the reason why this is coming back at this point, as opposed to it coming back complete, that that extra work is done in terms of the cycling, walking, the environmental aspects, and the full nature of movement in and out. And our bus services improvement plan has equally looked at how we go about improving public transport in terms of bus and also demand responsive transport, etc., etc. And that covers Peterborough in this area as much as it covers any other part of the region. It's absolutely vital, but this investment, as much as anything that is being requested, is to help the transition of business cases from where they were to where they need to be for that additional input into the sustainable actives, etc. There's no doubt there are two aspects in an economic environment such as Fengate that you need to have the capacity for people to get to and from the employment place. That's really vitally important. But you equally need to ensure that the businesses have the capacity and ability to conduct their business through whatever means, whether that is through vehicular or other sources of transportation, what have you. So the business case is there, and the team is very much designed to look at those aspects, and this is what the ask is today, and I'll leave it there if that helps.
Thank you, Roland. And I think it is very important that we have to be very mindful of the climate and the issues and all those accesses. But as has been said, there's still a long way to go on those aspects, and I think transport is still required by whatever propulsion. So therefore, there are some areas where we do need to improve some of the road infrastructure. I'll go to Councillor Robertson first, and then across to you, Councillor Hillier, if that's okay.
That might be useful, actually. My comment is that this is sort of, to some extent, this item is overlapping with the next one, which is about access to Fengate for the university. And I'm concerned that to make sure that proper access for the sort of people who will be wanting to go to that university is allowed for in the wider area immediately outside the university. This, I mean, are we sure that this sort of work that we're doing in the Fengate area is not going to contradict the access requirements for the university? I mean, perhaps you could, you know more about the local layout and everything. Perhaps you could comment on that from the Peterborough point of view. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Just before we come back to Councillor Hill, I just ask Roland Potter just to confirm on that, because I think it's one of those aspects that does include that area.
From a portfolio and projects and programme management perspective, I can assure you that the Peterborough City Council officer team and their design consultancy very much understand the dependencies and the interdependencies of the two areas. They're being run as two separate projects because of the nature of the funding processes and the Green Book processes, etc. But they are very much considered in both factors. And as you say, they do overlap, and there is another paper coming on the university access as the next item, but be assured that the officers in the Combined Authority and Peterborough City Council are very conscious with the design consultants on the interaction of the whole area.
Thank you, Roland. Councillor Hillier, I'm sure you would like to respond, because there's a couple of areas there, but as I said, as we've been pointed out, I do know they have been working behind the scenes, because it is looking at the whole area as well, including the access points. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say I have little to add to what Mr. Potter has already outlined in his inimitable style, very comprehensive, far better than I could have done. Mine would have been just political posturing, so, and I don't really do that well. They are two distinct areas in reality. We if you know Peterborough, we have a parkway system in Peterborough, which is extremely successful. It takes a lot of money to keep it successful, but as a new town in the 70s, the parkway system was put in place, and for better or worse, Peterborough is a car-friendly city. People come in one end and they cross it and they get out the other end relatively quickly. I think we had a statistic, it's the fastest commuter town of any town or city in the UK. I'm quite proud of that, to be honest. And it does attract a lot of businesses into our area, which can be good, often from an economic point of view, can be bad from a traffic point of view, but its success, I think, is predicated by how connective the city is. I think Mr. Potter has really quite comprehensively suggested that our highways engineers at Peterborough are across this. They are completely aware of the dependency of the two items on this agenda this morning. We can't really add much more to that, but the parkway is between the two. It's between Fengate and the university. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that response. I think we've gone. I'll let you have another go. If you could just move your microphone slightly down towards you, I think it would also help with the YouTube watchers.
One person's car friendly is another person's car dominated. So we have to be careful about this. My concern is the university is going to attract people without cars. A lot of youngsters don't have cars. They use buses, they use cycle, maybe motorbikes. But I think as long as the engineers are aware of all this and the plans do recognise that we've got to make it easy for people to get to their university and study there. We can't have empty skill centres again. Thank you.
If I might just respond to that. Yes, they are aware. Thank you for those comments. I completely appreciate that. But our highways engineers, as Mr. Potter's alluded, they are aware of the connectivity issues around the university, and you're absolutely right. We hope to attract many thousands of students to the university when it's open at the end of this year, I think, isn't it, Roland? They are aware of it, and they will plan for as little pain as possible, car friendly, car dominated. Okay, we are where we are, and the city is a very connected city, both within itself and from other regions, of course. Thank you.
Thank you for that response. And I think it links, as you say, closely to 2.2. So I don't think we probably need to go over some of those stuff. I'm happy to move on now from the report recommendations, if you are committee members. So the committee has recommended that the Combined Authority Board, A, approve the drawdown of £150,000 to complete the full business case stage of the project, and B, approve the slippage of the remaining in-year subject to the approval of budget, and note the need for a further reprofile exercise once the revised project timetable is established in January. The only thing I'd add to that, I just hope we don't slip too far on that. It's like all these areas. It will require a simple majority, and I know just because I've mentioned slippage, Roland Potter wants to come in there.
I just want to say that for the purposes of the medium-term financial plan, we're asking for a reprofile of the programme and the costs associated with that, so that we can tidy up the governance around the budgeting. That's all that relates to. There's a slight slippage because there's extra work to be done. But it's as simple as that. Really.
Thank you for that clarification there. So for this one, members, we just need a simple majority. Councillor Hiller, I'm guessing you'd like to propose that. And Councillor Seaton, we have a seconder. So we've proposed and seconded for those A and B. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much, members. We can now move on to item 2.2, which is the Fengates Phase 2 University of Peterborough access. And could I now ask Anna Graham, Transport Manager, to introduce the report? Thank you.
Thank you. The purpose of this paper is to provide a summary of the outcome of the package assessment report, or outline business case phase 1, and to seek approval to proceed to the full outline business case. At its meeting of the 24th of March 2021, the Combined Authority Board approved the commissioning of the package assessment report to determine a preferred option following the completion of the strategic outline business case for the embankment area. The two packages were similar with the main difference being that one package contained a proposed northbound off-slip linking the A1139 Frank Perkins Parkway with the Bishops Road, whilst the other package proposed dualling of Boongate West between Junction 5 and Junction 39. The package assessment report undertook further assessment of both packages, including a review of policy, design, construction, environment, operational and economic performance. Two key assumptions were updated. The first was revising the number of students expected to attend the Peterborough University, or ARU Peterborough. The second was the change in parking locations for the university. The economic assessment demonstrated that package 2 provides a much greater benefit to cost ratio than package 1. An initial programme for the outline business case has it starting in April 2022 and completing in July 23. An updated application form will be submitted to the DFT for consideration for the Major Route Network Programme Fund. This paper seeks to support for a change in the profile and drawdown dates of the current subject to approval funds with a reimbursement to the MTFP if funding is secured from the MRN application to DFT. Thank you, and I commend this paper to the board. Oh, sorry, to the committee.
Thank you, Anna. So you've got the report in front of you. You've heard the comment there. So thank you very much for that, Anna. And would any member of the committee wishing to ask any questions or make any comments, please do so now. Don't all rush. Councillor Shayler.
Yeah, again, my questions are around the heavy car dependency on of these projects. Obviously, this is between two different options, both milestones, road building options, basically. And I note at 6.8.1, the idea of modal shift was not even looked at. So it's not really looking at options at all. This is looking at milestones doing stuff on roads as far as I can tell. It might well be a missed opportunity to reprioritize the kinds of transport options and remove some of the car dependency. My concern really is about that we have to go to government to get funding for this, and then the climate, this beautiful document from Public Health England about active transport and where they're putting the money. It might be that we are pitching something that is a little out of date. But if anybody has any comments on that, that would be welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shayler. I've got an indication to my left or your right, or up at the top table there, that Roland wishes to make comment on that one.
Councillor Shayler, you're absolutely right, and this is a factor that we have engaged very closely with Peterborough City Council and their designers, as you mentioned. Peterborough is a rapidly evolving city, and we've talked about the economic growth to the south of this, which is vitally important. And then we've got this section here where a new university is going in, whereas we've recently just mentioned we intend to attract a large number of students for the future success of this region and the country as a whole from that facility. It is, as Councillor Hill has said, a historically car-dominated environment, but actually within the work that's been done within the strategic outline business case, it has.
I did actually say car-friendly.
Oh, car-friendly, sorry.
From my colleague.
Yeah, sorry, car-friendly. The emphasis here, and as a committee, you're more than welcome to put criteria on recommendations going forwards, but the emphasis here is looking at how parking, particularly in and around this area, can change, and walking, cycling facilities can advance, and ease of access into and out of the university area both from the Parkway location, but equally the surrounding routes around the city area there. So it's quite a comprehensive piece of work. The challenge here, and the reason we've asked for this funding to be drawn in the way it's drawn, is we want to maintain pace. We think it's really vitally important that we maintain pace. So actually the request here is for the funding from the existing MTFP with an application going into government. And if we're successful in that application, then that money comes back and supports this and returns money back to the MTFP. But you're absolutely right. We're in an evolution stage of business cases as they started, and they started some while ago, and moving through the new policy stages that we're at, both with government and regionally in our own climate change commitments, to ensure that we look at the balance of modes of transport rather than one or another. And I'll stop there.
Thank you, Ryan. And I think it is that very important point, is that, as we've all said, I think climate change really points, is getting that balance. And we're in that very, I almost said a planning term, tilted balance difficulty coming up. And actually, we've still got to move forward where we are currently, but be very mindful of the future. I think Councillor Hiller would like to come back on.
Again, just reflecting on what Mr. Potter has outlined, a car-friendly city, Peterborough, car-friendly connectivity, I think is the byword, but it isn't saturated with cars, I have to say. We do encourage and promote cycling and walking. We have the green wheel, which is a jewel around our crown, if you will, which is at 50 odd miles of super cycling facilities. I use it regularly myself. And the connectivity from a cycling and a pedestrian point of view coming into the city is very, very good, actually. So I think in the round, as Mr. Potter has alluded, modal shift, yes, of course. I think all modes of transport getting around in Peterborough are actively promoted and encouraged, not just the car. I don't want to put too much emphasis on that. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, good point, Councillor. And I can say from an independent perspective of Peterborough is that it certainly is that it is easily connectable to get in and out, and there are plenty of different modes of transport. I think the difficulty is when you look at a paper in isolation, it's very difficult to really understand the wider aspects of that one. Councillor Seaton.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points, really. I mean, I think apart from Peterborough City and Cambridge City, we have to remember we are in a very rural area, and we are never going to get rid of the car because it's too dependent within the rural areas. To get round that, of course, you need the public transport system, which I think we're all aware of, apart from in the cities, is not great. And until we crack that nut, then you are going to have cars that come into the cities, whether it's Peterborough or Cambridge. We're talking about Peterborough here. So, I just wanted to make the point that I agree with Councillor Hillier that actually the amount of opportunities for walking, cycling, you have the rail lines, and you have the internal bus systems within Peterborough are actually very good. It's coming into the city from outlying areas that creates, if you like, the amount of traffic. And the only option to that is to have better social bus services, particularly, and where possible, additional rail services. And I'm sure that Mr. Potter will know where I'm coming from on that one. But I just wanted to make that point, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you very much. As long as you're not going to dwell on the same comments, Councillor Shayler, which I know you're very passionate about.
Yes, I come back. This is not about getting rid of cars altogether. It's about how we go forward. And I think what I know of Peterborough, it is a well-planned city compared to Cambridge, for instance. It's and we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater as far as the current system, but it's how we can move forward from there. Cambridge is a terrible city in terms of planning and you know, trying to get traffic around. It's a cycling city, but it's not a very cycle friendly city. And it would be nice to see the student, the numbers, thousands of students, which would probably be more likely to use cycles in Peterborough in the future, to actually create a cycle friendly city as well, something that we would be proud of going into the future. Yes, in terms of public transport, of course, this is something that our mayor is very much behind, especially connecting rural regions. And so, yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm sure you didn't mean Cambridge is a terrible city. I know what you meant. From transportation price, it's a difficult city to transport.
In terms of getting cars around, getting bikes around, getting anything around,
Quite.
Cambridge is difficult.
I think we've gone through. No, okay, sorry, Councillor Robertson.
Sorry, yes, I was a bit slow there. I think we must recognise that this is an opportunity to design access to a new university in a town where there has not been a university. Cambridge has got two universities. One of them, the old one, is very much houses its students in its colleges, and they don't need to travel very far except by bike within the city. The other university, ARU, which of course is probably tied up with Peterborough as well, most of their students do live in town, but there are an awful lot who travel in every day. They come in by train, they come in by bus, they attempt to drive in, they can't park, so they don't do it very often. I think Peterborough's in that category, that there will be a lot of students who will be housed locally, but there will be an awful lot who will be traveling in. And they're the ones I think we've got to recognise. We've got to plan for them. Looking through the paperwork last night, I couldn't see very much about analysis of where the students would come from and how they would travel. I mean, I'd like to know more about whether that's been really analysed and thought about before we commit to something that's really geared to car travel. Thank you.
We are slightly straying off it because actually this is a transport one, but I know Roland Potter would come back because I know a lot of analysis has been done about the university itself and where these students will be coming from. So Roland, have you got any addition to that?
Yeah, it's a very fair point, Councillor Robertson, and thank you. Again, I think it goes back to something I said with the relationship between Fengate Phase 1 and Fengate Phase 2 and how the teams are working closely together there. And equally, there is a university team, and Anna works very closely with them, Peterborough City Council works very closely with them, and all of that is interlinked with it. And then we have a programme approach to ensuring there is the considerations of all those factors. I think this scheme, though, is not purely about the university access. It's called University Access, or Fengate Phase 2. It's very much about the Fengate area around the university with the importance of the university access within the core of it. But it's about managing the modes of transport in and out and around when it is. And I very much pick up the point that Councillor Seaton and yourself have made, and Councillor Shaler, about connectivity into Peterborough, which is extremely good. But when you link it to our Fenland Regeneration Stations work and the work that we do with Greater Anglia and other train operators, East Midlands Rail and Cross Country in particular, and Network Rail, looking at how we can get better services from those stations, that we can then link that to our bus services improvement plan, which gets buses into those stations. And in the regeneration work, we've very much looked at ensuring there are bus turning circles in the car park areas, for instance, so that if there's not a bus service at the moment, there can be in the future. And it's very much in mind of students that want to come to the university that are on the outliers, but equally other people economically that want to come in, but equally retail and leisure. It's a whole package consideration when we look at the portfolio.
Let's jump a few hands up now. Councillor Gough.
Yeah, thank you. I'd just like to build on what Councillor Robertson said, and that, I think one of the key things about the university in Peterborough is making sure it is accessible for all students. And you know, we know the problems of putting educational institutions in places which are not accessible, and the consequence which that has, both for the advantage potential which you lose to students, but also the vitality of the institution itself. I just am hearing what, and I know this, Roland, this is unfair because it's not your area, but I wonder whether this committee should actually have a look at ensuring that the Peterborough University, which is you know, a fantastic addition to the educational, that we are catering in the spirit of what we're trying to do with the transport for the maximum diversity of student population to be able to access that institution, and that we're not missing a trick here in terms of thinking about the specifics. And I know the scheme is, as you say, is a bit more than the university, but looking specifically at what transportation we are investing in to make sure that this facility does have the accessibility to make sure it thrives, and make sure that the students from various different backgrounds actually have the maximum opportunity of actually taking advantage of it. And I know that's sort of beyond the scope of this, but I think that's in the spirit of what we're trying to look at. That's perhaps a piece of work which would be useful for us to look at. And I'm interested in Councillor Hiller's views as to whether you think that would be helpful or not.
Thank you, Councillor Cobb. I think it's a point well made, as you say, slightly deviating away from where we are here. But I think what we can do is definitely feed it back through the combined authority to ensure that within that they definitely have taken all those aspects into consideration, especially for the not too distant future as well. Councillor Shayla.
Yeah, just a very quick one. At 2.62. It talks about the ambition to create a walkable city. And so I should say something positive, obviously, about active transport. In 6.3.1, about the costs, it gives a little bit of a perspective in that of the nearly 10 million to be spent on this, it's only 1.3 on sustainable travel. The rest is, so it's nearly 90% is on roads. So that's the kind of ratio, and you know, I would expect almost that to be the opposite way around, but that gives the money perspective, if you like.
I think it's probably to do with the cost of tarmac, but Councillor Hiller.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I think that's an excellent suggestion. The accessibility of the university, of course, is terrifically important for Peterborough. It is a much anticipated creation within our city to have a university, and if members of this committee are aware of where it is currently being built on the embankment of the city opposite Fletton Quays, overlooking the River Nen, depends where you come from. It's a lovely area, and it will be a very, very pleasant and open, and I think a beautiful campus with plenty of room around it. I think that's really very important to bear in mind. Road building, roads carry cars and cycles and pedestrians, so I don't think roads per se necessarily demand that they are only used by motor vehicles. I would also mention about I think one of the comments from the chair about cars. You know, cars are becoming less and less polluting now, and if in my own village, I represent a very large, geographically large rural ward north of Peterborough, with 9 villages, 9 parishes. The amount of electric vehicles I see traveling around my own ward, I think, is extremely encouraging. I myself have an electric vehicle, and the carbon emissions from those vehicles isn't directly related to the number of vehicles, it's related to the type of vehicles. And I think that we often lose sight of that and just brand the car as this demon on 4 wheels. Some are, of course, some of the older vehicles are still used, but government has determined that no petrol or diesel vehicles will be sold from 2030. Of course, there will still be petrol and diesel vehicles after that date, nothing new being registered. But I think it's encouraging just how many electric vehicles, and from a Cambridge point of view, it's probably bound to be even more than Peterborough. But they're not all gas guzzling CO2 belchers. And I think that is a point we ought to bear in mind. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hiller. I think we've exhausted. Someone, I didn't know whether you wanted to come back on a particular point, or
I was just going to come back on Councillor Goff's point, which I think is a fair point. As a committee, you're presented papers and read papers, but you don't get the opportunity to necessarily have had the workshops or collaboration or whatever. And we are a very collaborative combined authority. We've done an awful lot of engagement with elected members on the local transport connectivity plan and bus services, etc., etc. And I think what I heard from Councillor Goff is possibly this committee or a delegation from this committee, not just on this project, but on projects that come to this committee, possibly having the opportunity of workshop on certain schemes or whatever to get into the detail a little bit more if you wish to do so. I, as a head of transport, have absolutely no objection to having some engagement in that nature, but I appreciate you are all extremely busy people. So
I was also going to make the point for you, but I'm sure Councillor Goff, you'd like to come back on that, because I was going to say in general terms, it actually is looking at making sure it is all linked up, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And I think this is a specific issue. I think I hope we all share the common goal that Peterborough University is as accessible to as wide a range of possible students as we can manage, and therefore, if that is our objective, what I was suggesting was this committee look at whether there are other things which we could do to increase the accessibility to that university. We've talked about cars and bicycles, but it was also public transportation and so forth. Are we as a we are the combined authority transportation committee here, transport committee. Are we doing all we can in terms of promoting projects to make that university as accessible as it possibly could? Because I think that's my personal perspective. That's a highly desirable attribute of this university, and if we as a committee can do something in addition in order to improve that, then I think we should be considering that. So that was the spirit of what I was suggesting.
Thank you, Councillor Goff. And I think we would, well, I would definitely agree with what you're saying. And actually, it is that making sure that all modes of transport, hopefully less polluting that we currently use, could actually have that access, to give all sorts of access to the university in the future. I'm not seeing any other hands up. We've got a bit of it looks quite complex to me on this one. Can we go through A, B and C together? Or Robert, do you want to explain the difference between A, C and B for us, please? On the recommendations, that is.
Simply speaking, B involves this committee in deciding upon expenditure in relation to transport, and by the combined authorities order, that requires what's called a special majority, which is 2/3 of today's sitting committee. If there's a general sense that this will go through on unanimity, we might skip the complexity and take it on the nod, but perhaps, Chair, you could.
Thank you, Robert. I'm not seeing anybody differentiating completely between on A, B and C. So unless anybody was wishing to indicate otherwise, I'll take A, B and C as a complete set of recommendations. If I just read them out for you all. It's A is to approve the University of Peterborough Access Study Package Assessment Report as outlined business case phase 1. And B is the drawdown of £1.8 million in respect to the costs associated with the outlined business case phase 2, and conclude a grant funding agreement with Peterborough City Council on terms approved by the Head of Transport and Chief Legal Officer / Monitoring Officer, and C is to approve the submission of the updated application as Appendix 2 to the Department of Transport Mayor's Route Network Programme Fund. So do I have a proposer for that? Councillor Hiller, and a second to Councillor Seaton. So I've got proposal second for those three. So all those in favour of A, B and C, please indicate now. Thank you very much, committee. That's unanimous. So the next section is 2.3, which is pages 213 to 216, which is the A10 outline business case. And could I ask Roland Potter to introduce this report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee members. This is a report about the A10 and the proposed outline business case work. The committee is invited to recommend to the Combined Authority Board, A, note the outputs of the Cambridgeshire County Council on Highways and Infrastructure Committee paper. B, delegate authority to the head of transport in consultation with the monitoring officer and chief finance officer to develop the scope for the delivery of the outline business case. C, approve the release of £2 million worth of funding from the Department of Transport to be spent in 2022-2023 for the delivery of the outline business case, and agree a reprofiling of the remaining 21-22 budget into 2022-2023. And then D, subject to an extension to the existing DFT grant being agreed, delegate authority to the head of transport in consultation with the monitoring officer and chief finance officer to issue a capital grant funding agreement for the delivery of the outline business case to Cambridgeshire County Council. So principally, I think this committee is aware of the A10 between Cambridge and Ely, and it's had a number of studies done on it over time. And the latest one was where the Combined Authority team brought together the dualling study, the independent dualling study and the independent junctions study into one strategic outline business case. And there were some proposals that came out of that, and a bid went to government for some support funding. And we asked for £4 million to add to 2 million we'd already approved, making it a £6 million piece of work. The arrangement we got from DFT was to actually have half of what we've been asked for in terms of £2 million to develop the outline business case, to understand whether it needed the full additional £2 million for the complexity of a full dualling outline business case, or whether there was a smaller package of work and therefore it could be done within the £4 million total. That was the principle behind that. We've had ongoing engagement with County Council in regards to how we take this forwards, and that has been referenced at board recently. It's about the outline business case stage is a revenue stage, but the funding that we get from government is capital. So you have to capitalise the risk of that monies. And the principle behind that is that the asset owner within this, we need to make sure that we develop something and deliver something on the asset to avoid the risk of it having to return to revenue funding. That's the principle of it. We've been working with County Council. County Council, and Councillor Shelley will know because he's on the committee, recently had a paper presented to them in relation to Cambridgeshire County Council taking this forward with us in collaboration, but effectively leading it in terms of the funding risk. But it's a large piece of work that is not just for one or other organisation to take full ownership responsibility or whatever for. So this proposal is just basically to release the money so that we can get on with it, and then for us to work closely with Cambridgeshire County Council colleagues to develop the scope, working alongside the Department for Transport, because it's their money as well, to ensure that they're happy with the scope and they're happy to extend their current grant fund agreement throughout the 2022-23 period. And then we commission the technical supplier to assist us to do it and procure that and get it moving. That's principally what this paper is about. And it's a follow-on, as I say, from the paper that has already been presented at Cambridgeshire County Council, and it's tidying up the loose ends from a governance perspective. So I commend the report to the committee for questions.
Thank you, Roland. That did help explain some of the intricacies within that paper. So Committee are open to questions. Councillor Shayler.
Yeah, the question that you have actually touched on about the time aspect, there is a little bit of time pressure on us to act. Otherwise, the risk is that the money will be returned. Can you further elucidate what, you know, when is our deadline?
We need to be working on this now. We need to be having close discussions amongst ourselves, Cambridgeshire County Council and DFT, to ensure that the scope not only delivers against the ambition of the major roads network from the DFT's perspective, but delivers against the ambitions and the visions of the current Cambridgeshire County Council and combined authorities views around modes and balance of modes. And we have to, as part of the Green Book business case process, explore all opportunities and challenge them through the relevant tests to then state whether they are feasible, affordable or deliverable, and against the criteria of the assurance framework, the constitutions of our organisations, all three. And we need to be launching this immediately after approval at board if we've got the recommendations from this committee and the approval. The teams are already in discussion. It's just a matter of ensuring that we can move on from a funding perspective, really. So I would say if we haven't got a scope by the end of March, we're struggling.
Thank you for that, Roland. And important question, because it does sound like it is very critical on timing front. So, and I think it from a committee perspective, from my perspective, it's the concern is always that we do meet those timelines and deadlines, isn't it? Otherwise, we could be putting going the wrong way fast and not actually getting across the finish line. Anybody else wishing to make comments on this? There's something to note. Councillor Robertson.
I suppose I'm going to question the foundation for this whole plan to dual the road from Ely down to Cambridge. This is a corridor, transport corridor, which is excellently provided with train transport, much more efficient than the road. Even if you dual it, the train will still be faster. I'm just wondering whether the study, the business case that will be carried out, whether we'll realise that and look into the aspects of where the cars will go when they get to down to.
Sorry, your microphone seems to have packed up.
Is that working? Is that working? Yes.
It will, but for those on visual,
right,
we've had to move microphones.
Yeah, sorry. Actually, mine has gone off now, so oh no, I better. Does that work? Yes, better. So the dualling of that road is seen as a vital part of the infrastructure for the area, but where will the vehicles that travel down it go to? And will the business case actually identify what the road will actually achieve, as well as putting more cars on the road? I mean, once you get down to Cambridge, the parking facilities will be restricted. We don't want too much traffic in Cambridge, as you know. We've got to promote public transport more so. As I mentioned, the train route is already a very excellent one and could be grown further with more use of the tracks. And bus services as well into the city from the north of the area are going to be improved. So I'm just hoping that the business case will actually not just assume that everything's all right, but actually will try and justify the purpose for this road. I don't know if anybody else has these misgivings as well.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Councillor Shayler.
I have kind of similar bits to add. Cambridge North, Central, South stations, obviously we're improving it. We have SOAM has come online and ahead of schedule. We don't want to compete with trains, clearly. As a committee, we are looking at both of these, and it would be terrible if, if the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. But I understand this money is not only for dualling. There's also a number of intersections on the A10 that need to be looked at in terms of non-motorized users and others as well. And so, we will be discussing on highways what else we can do if it's not dualling. And I wonder if Roland or somebody else has comments.
Roland. Yeah, I'm happy to come back both on Councillor Robertson's points and Councillor Shaders, which are absolutely correct. The corridor is extremely important. It's extremely important for the movement of the local people and the connectivity of communities as much as it is the traffic travelling from A to B. The integration of modes of transport, and we've talked in board on other aspects about integration, how we collaborate and link many things together. Certainly the priorities, and even in the strategic outline business case, we talked about a complete segregated cycling and walking route, Ely to Cambridge, which would actually reduce the current cycle network, which is the national cycle network, of about 21 miles down to 13.7 miles, and a much safer route as well. So that was always within our ambition in the business case and continues to be so. Community connectivity is really important because the A10 currently is high volume traffic at peak times particularly, and that in itself creates a division of some communities along its route. It's also an area of high agricultural use, and you get a lot of slow moving vehicles through periods of harvest and sowing, etc., the cycles of agriculture, and that has a significant impact on the route. So dualling, widening, whatever it may look like, is not always just about more cars. It's very often about journey time reliability, safety, because behaviours change if you're not stuck behind something that's going 5 miles an hour, and I've experienced that on that road. But equally, safety is a factor, and we know that route has sadly had its troubles, and that needs to be a big consideration within the work that goes forward with Cambridgeshire County Council, and the team are already aware of that. But it's working out through the business case processes what is the appropriate solution for the location and the situation. This is a route that's very, very important for access to the Fens, as well as its connectivity Ely to Cambridge, but also Kings Lynn down. So there are a lot of factors to consider, but they all need to be considered in integration. So we look at the rail, we look at the Waterbeach development, we look at the other developments like the Science Park, but we equally have to consider what happens at the Milton Roundabout. We've had a working group specifically outside of this scheme looking at that with County Council, Highways England, Greater Cambridge Partnership, Greater Cambridge Planning Services, etc. Because of course then you've got the impact of the Northeast Quarter, where your net zero plans and options on transport is considered as well. We then have the city access proposal that we're linked with Greater Cambridge Partnership, which is looking at not only management within Cambridge City itself, and therefore where are the cars going to go, but also the improved bus network that comes out of those proposals as well, that will link further out up to Ely and other places. But within that, we've then got the bus services improvement plan that looks at variations of the DRT scheme that we're doing in West Huntingdonshire at the moment, to look at how we get people that can't access the main bus route or can't access the main rail route, but have a loop potential that gets them to a main bus network or a main railway route, so that we give people options. And I think it's absolutely vitally important in this business case and in the scope of this business case, which we'll be developing with Cambridgeshire County Council, that those things are considered, and that the technical supplier that comes on board is linked to all of those other projects and schemes that are going on, to be able to take and utilise and share the information to ensure that we have consideration on all of those things.
Thank you, Roland. The thing I wrote down you then mentioned was the fact of safety. Knowing full well from my previous life form, the A10 was then an absolute nightmare. So that's a primary, one of the main reasons I would imagine is also to look at all the safety aspects of all those junctions that lead on. And of course, the growth that's going up in that area as well. And fingers crossed, not all that traffic, I assume, will not be going into Cambridge. But we do take your point is that, you know, we do have to be mindful of what happens at the further down the line. Councillor Robertson, if it's something you can come back on.
It's a new aspect to it. You probably, I don't know if you're aware, but in our local, in Cambridge Independent this morning, there's an article about the cycle lanes on the side of the A10 and the concerns that they're not actually going to be fit for purpose. They are not apparently going to comply with the recommended layout, width and everything in certain places. And safety is very much, I quite agree, safety is entirely important to things like just any form of transport, but cyclists are particularly at risk inevitably. So I'm just a bit concerned that presumably the design of the road will take into account allowing for a full width of cycle lane beside it. And this section that they're talking about providing, the urban and civic builders are going to provide, must comply with that overall standard, surely. I don't see how it can be allowed to go ahead without it. The concern is not just that you know, we're not complying with regulations or standards. Those standards are being applied by our planning authorities when we get builders coming to us wanting to build roads, build houses and developments. We are insisting that those regulations are adhered to. So if we're not going to allow it, if we're going to allow this proposal for a part of this route to not comply with regulations, it's not really acceptable, is it? I just wonder whether we shouldn't be a bit more robust about ensuring that the width of the pavement and the cycle lanes on this route are actually complying with the regulations and the recommended regulations.
Interesting point, and I am aware that there are occasions when it is difficult to squeeze in something, and that's that difficult aspect. But I'm sure the Highways Authority and Roland might want to come back as well. Will ensure us, I would imagine, that we do stick within the regulations where at all possible.
I can't comment on an article in the paper in relation to a developer proposal. That would be very much for the Highways Authority, Cambridgeshire County Council to consider in terms of its approval of what's built or not. In terms of the proposal of the A10 outline business case, the principle of the business case process is that we consider all of the elements that are related to the design manual for roads and bridges, and that we have assurance against those sort of details. There are challenges in certain locations, absolutely, but that's what engineers are in there for and what designers are in there for, to find solutions to those, and that's what we will push them to do. But as I say, I can't comment on the specific item that Councillor Robertson raises in relation to that article.
Thank you. We could go off in a complete divergence on this one, and I think it's just making sure, as you say, it's something which we're not 100% sure, but we do need to ensure, I think, from a committee perspective, that all reasonable steps are taken to ensure that everything is done within the guidelines of what we would wish them to be. So, as long as it's a quick one.
Yeah, it's a quick one. Obviously, we can't comment on Section 278 situation with urban. But the principle that this particular piece, it seems to be more expensive than they were expecting, I think is what's going on. But do we have a principle that we could perhaps step in and help with these kinds of things if it's within what we're trying to achieve? That I think is the
noted, but obviously not for this committee today. But Councillor Gough.
Just going to respond a little bit to Councillor Robertson, because I think the dualling of the A10, the sort of concept of that being sort of car based. I think the answer to your question about cycling is that, of course, there is a cycle path on the A10 at the moment, and it's awful. It is truly awful. And, you know, any part of this scheme, I'm sure will look at the opportunities to upgrade that. And in fact, the sort of plans at the moment will go partially to sort of improve that situation as well. So we have to be cognizant of what is there at the moment, which is I'm sure one of the reasons why this scheme is on the table.
Yeah, I think you're quite right on that one. Awkwardly, Councillor Shayler's just left. Are there any other questions from the committee? So if I move on to the report recommendations, if you're all happy. So the first one is, I'll go to them, is to note the outputs of the highways and infrastructure paper, which I think we've all noted. The second one is a delegate authority to the head of transport in consultation with the monitoring officer and chief financial officer to develop the scope and delivery of the outline business case. Is that a voting request, isn't it? To delegate that one? That's a voting one, isn't it? A B? Yes. Okay. C, to approve and release the £2 million funding from Department of Transport to be spent in 22-23 for the delivery of the outline business case and agree reprofiling the remaining 21-22 budget into 22-23. And D is subject to the extension of the existing DFT grant being agreed, delegate authority to the head of transport in consultation with the monitoring officer and chief financial officer as he turns the page to make sure he gets all the wording correct, to issue a capital grant funding agreement for the delivery of outline business case by Cambridgeshire Council. We can go on a simple majority on that one. So even with Councillor Shayler being not around, do I have a proposer for that? Councillor Seaton, a seconder. Councillor Gough, those in favour? Assume we take an abstention for Councillor Shane. Thank you, members.
Chair, do you want to pause for Councillor Shayler to hear the entirety of the
I think
presentation on this one for a
be
moment?
wise if we have a 2-minute pause for anybody else that needs to quickly cool down. Thank you, members. Happy for us to continue. If I move on to item 2.4, which is the A141 Huntingdon and St Ives strategic outline business case, which is on pages 217 to 230. And could I ask Emma White to introduce the report, please?
Morning all. The recommendations for this paper are to note the St Ives study and progress. B, note the A141 and St Ives option appraisal report. C, note the A141 and St Ives strategic outline business case. D, recommend the combined authority committee approve the development and costing up of the next stage of the project for the outline business case and preliminary design, and recommend approval for the programme and costing up of the local improvement schemes for St Ives. At the August 2020 board, evidence demonstrated that the A141 bypass was the better performing option, and it was approved to commission a strategic outline business case for that option. In March 2021, the board approved the commencement of the St Ives proposed strategic outline business case paper. In June 2021, the board were presented with the latest update on the A141 Huntingdon strategic outline business case, including the results of the engagement. The St Ives public and stakeholder engagement was undertaken between the 14th of June and the 5th of July in 2021. A summary of the results of the public engagement showed approximately half of the respondents were residents of the area, and the majority of these indicated that they made trips within the local area by car or van. The most common issues that respondents were most concerned about was congestion, heavy traffic and road safety. Most respondents strongly agreed with the need to reduce road traffic as well as the need to improve the ease of bus and coach use. When asked about proposed options overall, respondents most favoured a bypass option with other sustainable active travel options as well as local junction improvement packages. Following this engagement, an option assessment report was undertaken for both the A141 and St Ives. It was at this point that both the A141 and St Ives projects have been aligned and brought together. 3 packages were taken forward for the strategic outline business case for the A141 and St Ives together. It should be noted that all packages have local public transport, active travel and junction signal improvements in. Package A includes a bypass between Hunterton and St Ives with no interconnecting junctions. Package B is a bypass between Hunterton and St Ives with junctions. And package C is a bypass of just the Hunterton area. The strategic outline business case shows that overall, package A and B both perform strongly against the objectives of addressing the current congestion on the network with a reduced level of delay, improved journey times and a reduction in rat running. Package C does offer some improvements in this area, but to a much lesser extent. The additional connectivity offered in package B enables the package to perform the strongest, and the scheme has a benefit cost ratio of 1.74, which is a medium value for money. Package A yields a benefit cost ratio of 1.34, which falls into the low value for money, and package C has a BCR of 0.13, which is classified as poor value for money. The overall conclusion of the strategic outline business case is that there is a case to progress the project to outline business case. Further investigation into option A and B, or a combination of these, might yield the best outcome, or even a further alternative, as well as other sustainable options that could complement the scheme. The next step of the study includes collaboration with Cambridge County Council to start the development of a proposal, programme and cost for the next stage of the project, which is the outline business case and preliminary design. St Ives local improvements. St Ives local improvements include the delivery of St Ives package of highway improvements identified in the A141 and St Ives Transport Study Option Appraisal Report, which was done in 2020. To progress this project onto the next stage, collaboration again with Cambridge County Council is necessary, and a proposal cost and programme will be developed to bring forward to committee and board to draw down the funds to commence the schemes as soon as possible. I would like to thank the project team for all the hard work on this project and conclude that the recommendations are: A, to note the St Ives study in progress; B, note the A141 and St Ives option appraisal report; C, note the A141 and St Ives strategic outline business case; D, recommend the combined authority board approve the development and costing up of the next stage of the project for outline business case and preliminary design; and E, recommend the combined authority approve the programme for and costing up the local improvement schemes for St Ives. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Emma. I won't start, as it is my area, so as chair. So are there anybody who'd wish to make comment before I make some comments myself? You're going to get one chance. No, thank you, Councillor Gough.
Yeah, so I'm interested to hear your reaction to what I'm about to say. So unlike some of the other schemes, this is at a stage where we can actually shape this a bit, right? I sort of went through the options A, B, and package C here, and it seems to me that all of them, all the packages, if I'm right, is a combination of a road scheme plus other improvements. All of them are that bundle, and some perform better than others. And package C obviously doesn't perform terribly well at all. My concern is that, you know, as we've seen as a trend here with the sort of government policy and our own thinking about the relative prioritization of building new roads versus other means of trying to address issues of congestion and pollution and so forth, that by bundling each of these options together, a road building scheme and a set of other non-building schemes, we'll never really understand what is the contribution of the benefits of the road building versus the other elements of the package. And that appears to me to be a bit of a problem when we come to looking at the case. So each one of these schemes, package A, B, and C, has got extension to guided busway services, new and improved active travel connections, junction and signal improvements in St Ives. That's common to all three. Shouldn't we, and I would have thought there's a case for looking at that set of package is as a sort of control case in isolation, so that you've got a non-road building, a non-new road building set of options, so that you can compare the other packages against. Because if you don't, you'll never know what the relative merits of the elements in those packages are. And it seems to me that the consequence of that is we run the risk of ending up in a situation where none of them actually pass the threshold. So we're starting with a case which is only a package of a medium value for money. It seems to me that there's, given the sort of DFT's reaction on the A10 and sort of pushing us back to just wanting to look at junction improvements alone, there's a risk here that unless we have a package which is not including road building, we might end up actually with everything failing. So I guess I'm interested in your views on that, because I'm sure that something needs to be done here. It's just appears to me that how this is structured at the moment, we're running the risk that we end up with nothing being done.
Thank you for that, Councillor Goff. Can't see anybody else jumping in. So interesting points from that moment. For my one, and it is an area of, obviously you'd expect, I know extremely well, it's a combination of a lot of things. Within the local plan, we have a lot of designated area for growth for both commercial and housing in those localities. And we know with that area of growth that there'll be increased pressures for all modes of transport, as you've put there. It's trying to link the lots. A lot of work has gone on in the background on this to ensure that it's not just one, but it actually is making sure that we look at the whole aspects of how things will move. And it's not just that locality, it's unlocking RAF Whitton, it's improving 141, it's actually looking at rounds the areas of St Ives, which those that you go through St Ives can be wonderfully clear and clean to go through. And other times you could be stuck there for actually hours. It's actually really is looking at that whole locality of and specifically also on growth, which we need a lot more affordable houses in that locality as well. So what we realise is for the future, to unlock some of that, we're up. Yeah, I'd say as a planning authority, you know, we're under some pressure as well. So where it says in 4.1, are there any significant implications? There are some quite significant implications for the district council from a perspective of we need to move, we need to grow, we need to provide more housing, more affordable housing in those particular areas. So actually, there is a lot of pressure from a planning perspective as well on this, and we realise that it's a timing one is really difficult. This has been going on for quite a while, as you can see from the paperwork, of trying to resolve various issues, and then something else comes in, like a third river crossing on, etc. And it really is creating quite a major issue in that area. But take into account what you said about climate and all that, we have looked at that as a group, and actually we've worked very closely with the combined authorities with members meeting to ensure that it's not just a road, it's looking at other bits and pieces. But until we actually go further forward and we know what the timeline is, which is another specific one which we're really concerned about, because the timelines keep drifting and drifting and drifting, we're under particularly quite a lot of pressure. And dare I say, potentially financial pressure as well, because these areas have already been allocated. So therefore, if we don't move forward, we could end ourselves up with within highways of trying to catch up with what might go in there. We definitely
from a locality from Huntingdon District Council do need this to look at growth. We do need to improve what's already there as well, because it is, you know, quite chaotic at a lot of times of congestion. We do need to look at it in the wider aspects of how that links are. We're not in the lucky position like Peterborough, where they have a very good road network. It's a relatively poor road network, and it's coming in from other areas, from Ramsey, further afield. Again, it links all those up and tries to free up the traffic to reduce the congestion and contamination there. So from my perspective, obviously, I hope this goes through and we continue with it. My concern is the time frame, and I know Roland has had conversations, is that we keep stalling on it. We've not got clear time frames. Others outside are looking at saying, you know, you must tell us or we'll go ahead, because they have the right to go ahead with things. So there is a big concern from our perspective by not moving forward, but equally we don't want to jump into it and get it wrong. So it's not a case of just railroading it through, but it is a case of moving it through, but having some clearer timelines. And that's the one thing I'd ask from the authority as well, is that we have some clearer timelines on what's going to happen, when it's going to take place, and some bit of clarity. And specifically, as we all know, as I've mentioned it before, as to where the combined authorities sit with it as well, from a clarity, because it's been a bit of a delayed since June as to whether we are or not going ahead with this, and it causes a bit of unease from that perspective. So from my perspective, I do agree. I mean, obviously, when you look at it from the options, there is a benefit from it. One of the options is not a lot of benefit, and I'll leave it at that for the moment. And I can see Roland wants to come back on a couple of areas for me. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Gough, for your comments, which are appropriate and relevant, obviously, and thank you, Councillor Niche, for your comments as well. There's a number of things to respond to there, if I may. One, let's put it into context. I got involved in this some while ago when there was a St Ives study being done and an A141 study, but there was the Huntingdon Third River Crossing, which was not being done and was almost being avoided, it felt. So we actually did, at a committee, suggest that for validity of the A141 and validity of the St Ives studies that were being done, we had to include the Huntingdon Third River Crossing as a consideration. And that was a piece of work that vitally had to be done. And it concluded that actually, for a number of reasons, that was not viable. And it enabled us to move forwards on the St Ives strategic outline business case and the A141 strategic outline business case. This is a classic case of the transition from where we are to where we need to be in the future, some decades ahead. And yes, there's some work to be done. There's an awful lot of pressure in the area, as Councillor Nice says, in terms of growth. And it's an area which is confined because of the beautiful area below Huntingdon, which is the Great Ouse Valley, and the necessary need to protect those sort of areas. But that means that there are very few crossings. You get a lot of traffic that goes east-west through the towns and centres around, let alone the pressures of north-south from the A141, the A1, the A14, etc., etc. It is absolutely clear from the work that's been done to date that there is going to need to be a highway solution of some sort here to enable that growth to happen. But that is not about encouraging growth of cars. It's about actually resolving some of the historical congestion issues that exist, as well as enabling capacity for improved bus services, improved public transport services, such as the solution that we're doing at West Huntingdonshire with the DRT, which is having great results to date, I'm pleased to say, that is encouraging people out of their car. And we've got examples of that. But we need space in which for those things to operate as well. I take on board what Councillor Gough says about, is there a control measure, and is there a cycling, walking, public sector extension, whatever, that in isolation that could be done. These are considerations that are taken when you're developing business cases, I can assure you of that. And but actually, in terms of this, it is absolutely clear that there are different needs in St Ives to around Huntingdon, but actually whatever you do in St Ives has an impact on Huntingdon, North Huntingdon, and whatever you do in North Huntingdon has an impact in St Ives, which is why there's the proposal here that the two business cases be brought together as the one. We are also in the transition, as I've mentioned on other things, where we have different policy situations now than when this first started in the feasibility and then when it went into the strategic outline business case. And we therefore have much more stringent requirements on the design teams and in the scope that's built to develop environmental, sustainable transport, climate change impacts, net zero, et cetera, et cetera. So they will all be factors going into the next stage. What I would also like to say is that the proposal in here is that we work closely with Cambridgeshire County Council within the scope to look to bring forward the package of suggested solutions for St Ives that came out of the feasibility study. And I referenced in a previous meeting that the March area transport study that's been undertaken by Cambridgeshire County Council with combined authority involvement has been an exemplar, that's not the right word, an excellent example of how to work business cases into development at the same time as deliver some actual physical improvements for communities. And I would encourage the committee to consider this as almost modelled against what we've been doing in the March area transport study for the benefit of communities and the type of sustainable transport that, that Councillor Gough talks about.
Thank you very much for that. I mean, I'm just coming back on a couple of things, as you're quite right, they are intrinsically linked, which is why we did go forward and actually say they do need to be linked. To say, unfortunately, there's been a few slow ups, as we're aware, along the route. And I do think we do need the clarity, if the committee agree, of actually some of those timescales as well, which, you know, we can talk about later. But Councillor Shayler.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I was minded to wait until your input. I was thinking about the kind of travel hub aspect of combining guided bus with train and with other parts further on Huntingdon and to this site here clearly lack public transport. There are other aspects about the growth in local tourism, which this area lends itself. Post-COVID, less people are flying and they're finding alternatives closer to home. But I very much take on board that there could be, you know, benefits to a roadway in this particular area. We've also been discussing this on highways, but it's often a problem where we relieve congestion only to invite more traffic. You know, it's not necessarily an overall solution, but I don't want to say too much more on that, but I take on board the comments from the chair especially. Thank you very much.
No, thank you for that. And also with the Future High Streets funds, we're looking at improving things like Huntingdon and St Ives. And again, it is actually just freeing up some of that traffic of problems that already exist. Yeah. Councillor Gough, you did indicate, but you seem to have Could you just put your speaker on? Thank you.
Sorry, I wasn't suggesting that we don't proceed with this. I just was suggesting some sort of alternative. You know, it does strike me that when you put this business case, and I presume this is something which will involve the DFT at some stage, someone's going to ask, so, you know, what would, if package A comes out to be the best or package B comes out to be yes, someone in DFT is going to ask, well, what would it look like if you did this and didn't do that part of it? And if we haven't got an answer to that question, I guess is that going to be a problem? I'd also just point out that, you know, for what it's worth, is that if you go to in your report, let me get the right page here. Yeah, 3.1.2. You know, in terms of responses, is that if, as I think you're doing, is combining option 4, 5, and 6, that actually that would be by far and away the most popular response of anything. So Chair, I just posed the question again, as to whether in order to make this a sort of sound and cover all of the bases, whether there is any merit in sort of putting together that as a control case. But I will defer to Mr. Potter if he thinks that's not a problem, and assurance that when it comes later in the process that no one's going to raise that as an issue.
I'm happy to respond. Councillor Gough, I respect this committee and the comments and input from the committee, and I can assure you that your comments will be factored into the scope and discussions that Emma, as Officer for Combined Authority, and Cambridgeshire County Council officers and Huntingdon District Council officers in those discussions will have. It's noted and will certainly be a consideration, I'm sure.
Was, I mean, I'm going to be
Yes,
30
yes,
seconds. That's it.
very-
Go on. Go on.
I meant to associate myself with Councillor Gough's. My background is in science, and yes, I often where is the control? What are we comparing with? Is often my problem with this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much on that one. And I'll just reiterate, there are, just so the Combined Authority aware, that they do realise there are some significant implications, financial implications for HDC on some of this, and from a timing perspective as well. We do need to ensure that we keep up with the pace. And if I'd really like for myself for the district council specifically to have some very clear timelines on that for the future. I know we can work with that to ensure that happens. So I can't see anybody else wanting to indicate that they'd like to speak. So the report recommends that the committee is invited to recommend to the authority board that they note the St Ives study and progress, note the 141 and St Ives options appraisal report, note the 141 and St Ives strategic outline business case, recommend that the Combined Authority Board approve the development and costing of the next stage of the project for outline business case and preliminary design, and recommend the Combined Authority Board approve the programme for and costing up of the local improvement schemes in St Ives. And this last bit really reflects to what you were saying about some of the small schemes that can be done fairly quickly to free up some of the areas which were looked at some while ago. So with that one, I need a simple majority. I'd like to move that from the chair, so I'd recommend that myself. So if I have a seconder, thank you, Councillor Shayler, I have a seconder there. So for A, B, C, D, and E, all those in favour? That's a majority. Thank you very much. So moving on to item 2.5, which is pages 231 to 234. This is the local transport and connectivity plan update. And could I ask Tim Bellamy to introduce this report, please? Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Councillor Neath, and hopefully you can all hear me. Good morning, members. So before I start, I think I need to outline there's a slight error in the paper.
Tim, can I just hold it? Is there any way of increasing your volume slightly where it's a little bit quiet this end?
I can try and read closer to the go closer to the mic if that would help.
That is better, thank you.
Yeah. So with regards to before we start, I would like to outline an error in the paper. On the first page, it references a October consultation, and in fact that was in November. So it's just a pure, it's a minor change that I just thought I needed to highlight to the committee. The purpose of the paper is to give an update on the soft launch engagement. As I said, it was a 4-week engagement piece that was between the 1st of November and the 28th of November. We still need to do some more work around that. You said we did analysis, and that needs to be undertaken, but that will continue as we continue to develop the local transport and connectivity plan. The material was available online, and we based most of the engagement piece because on that basis due to COVID, etc. But we did do some further engagement with members, yourselves, and also leaders, and also with constituent councils, other members as well, but also businesses and communities. And that the feedback from that will also be fed into the plan going forward. But quickly, in summary, there was 553 online responses with 16 hard copies, and that they've all been analysed. But just in summary, 96% understood why we need to an update, and that was based around COVID and all the various elements that we've been through previously. The committee. 57% agree with the vision is right, and over 50% agreed about the objectives were correct as well. So we've got a bit of a caveat there to move forward. With regard, the bus routing was the highest concern, and needed to be reflected in 5 of the 6 parts of the region. And with only Cambridge being different, with the highest one there being a reduction in congestion in the city. And this really just reiterates the need for a tailored approach from the LTP. So actually one size doesn't fit all. We need to make sure we have the right solutions in the right locations, and that will happen as we continue to develop the local transport and connectivity plan. But as we say, as we continue to develop the local, the LTCP, we're going to continue to engage with committee, but also constituent council and individual meetings, GCP and stakeholders, etc. So this was a paper to, by way of update with a soft launch. And so I commend the report, and I'm happy to take any questions, and hopefully you heard all that.
Thank you, Tim, for that. So members, any points of clarification or comments you wish to make on this? Thank you for not disappointing me, Councillor Shane.
Thank you, Chair. The first comment really is the contrast between these the results here and what we're thinking to do in Peterborough, for instance. And again, it kind of comes back to my I think a bit of a theme of what I've been saying through this meeting about where we should be going in terms of active transport. These numbers are stark, obviously 83% talking about improving cycling and pedestrian links and that sort of thing. If you look at and people saying that we need to update our system, and I think the engagement with the public has been very, very good. And so I'd like to praise the people involved with this. But just to see that contrast between, you know, where we are thinking of putting money and where people actually think we should put money. So that is my comment at this point. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any other comments? Councillor Robertson.
Just a brief one, that although Cambridge put reducing congestion as our top priority, I suspect that bus routing within the city is tied in with that. We had less congestion, the bus routes would work better and could be more extensive. So I agree with my colleague from the County Council that the priorities have got to follow the views of the public to a lot larger extent than they do at the moment.
Thank you for that. I suppose my only comment would be is from a district council perspective, as a committee member, there's an awful lot of these engagements going on at the moment, and it's quite difficult to respond to them all in a timely manner. But that's not your fault. That's probably the end. It's just something to bear in mind from a combined authority perspective. I know there's an awful lot of officer time gets tied up in these. So with that, if we have no other further comments, Councillor Gough does. Oh, I've obviously sparked something.
So, sorry, I and Mr. Bellamy may have said this, but can you just lay out for us the timetable for you? In the report, it talks about the CA board meeting being in January. There's another formal consultation. What's your expectation of when that will be launched?
Sorry, just going off mute. Sorry, Councillor Gough. There are further discussions to be had with leaders and yourselves around the time frame, because following extensive consultation and feedback that we've received both from the consultation, the engagement piece, but also the feedback from constituent council and the changes we want to make, etc. We are currently going through a review around whether it is still appropriate to go forward with the original time frame for a board of decision in January and then subsequently in March. So there are ongoing discussions. Actually, we're thinking that this may well change from being a refresh to a rewrite, and therefore the next stage will be a consultation of 12 weeks rather than 6 weeks, and that may impact on the timing. But those discussions are commencing, and I will come back with an update in due course to members of this committee as and when I get anything more concrete on that.
Yeah, thank you for that. I suppose it's that difficult one of knowing how many responses come and how many changes they have to make as to how long it's going to take to feed those back in again. But Councillor Shaler.
Yes, just very quickly to come back. One of the things I like about this committee is its overview. We have in Cambridgeshire layers of government, and so we are in a privileged position to think about the broadest perspectives. And I very much appreciate the comment about solutions for locations. Clearly, there are differences in rural locations, and but it comes back to something that is common to us all, which is about connectivity, communities, strong minds, bodies. And this is something that works overall. I'm talking with a lot of equestrians and very rural solutions to these sort of things. So I think it is important to keep this in mind as we go forward.
Yeah, no, so Roland, you want to come back on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'd just pick up on something that Tim said, and something that Councillor Nish said as well here, in relation to the consultation, the collaboration, and the overview of this committee, and also the Combined Authority. The Combined Authority has committed to extensive engagement, probably the largest engagement with elected members that we've done on any piece of work in the time that I've been involved, which is 3.5 years in the Combined Authority, and we welcome that feedback. It has put pressure on the team in terms of review of that feedback and the impact that has on the local transport plan and whether it's a refresh or a rewrite, and that then also has an impact potentially on the programme as to whether it's a 6-week consultation or a 12-week consultation, because they're the legislative processes, and we are running through all of that at the moment. But it is absolutely vital that we get this right. The commentary on the people have spoken point, and this is a policy document and a strategy document, let's be clear, that will enable us to go through our transition. We talk about the transition, I've spoken about it several times here today, from where we were to where we need to be, but considering the specific needs for the specific locations. And Councillor Seaton made reference to Fenland, for instance. We know Peterborough's a different city to Cambridge, for instance, and etc. So it's an overarching document which will enable authorities, developers, innovators to come with solutions to those specific needs. So I
think it just reiterates the fact it's not going to be easy. There's never one solution, is there? There's going to be a number on that one. I'm happy to move on that one. So can we check you're all happy to go to the recommendations, which are to the committee is invited to recommend the Combined Authority Board, and that they note the outputs of the October soft launch public engagement. Okay, all noted. No vote required, it says here. Now, I've just realised there's a time frame on the time here, and I'm actually not sticking to it. So first, I've almost got to the end and realised it says. Anyway, moving on swiftly, should we say, to 2.6, which is pages 235 to 242, which is the Performance and Finance Report for January 2022, and we have hopefully Rod Emery to introduce the report. But it's gone very quiet. Has anybody got in contact with Rob? Yeah. In the absence of some connectivity on the transport and infrastructure side, where I asked Roland if he could help support us through this paper, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee. This is the regular budget and performance update that this committee receives. The recommendation is that the Transport and Infrastructure Committee is recommended to note the January budget and performance monitoring updates. The voting arrangements note it's a note only item, no vote required. This report provides a regular budget performance reporting to the Transport and Infrastructure Committee. The Combined Authority Board has decided that budget and performance reporting should be seen in the round, and that's obviously absolutely correct to do so. At its January 2021 meeting, the Combined Authority Board approved a new business plan and medium-term financial plan, including revenue and capital projects for the 2021-22 period. This report represents or presents the progress made against these budgets, along with any changes in line with subsequent executive committee and board decisions. Members' attention is drawn to the change in presentation in this meeting's report. The sign used to show the direction of forecast variance has been changed to align with the reports produced for other committees and the CA board. As such, positive variances represent forecast overspends and negative variances forecast underspends. Summary of the financial position of the authority is shown in the table within 3.2 for the 8-month period to 30th of November 2021. Items to be noted: the outturn position shows a positive variance of 1.1 million against the approved budget. The closure of the one CAM was approved by the Combined Authority Board in October 2021. No further revenue expenditure is expected. The bus review implementation is forecasting an underspend of £669,000 in relation to additional bus services support. This is partly offset by an overspend on bus service subsidisation of £196,000. The budget funds 3 bus routes, but a 4th route is currently unbudgeted, creating an overspend position. In addition to the 16.4 million approved to spend budget, there is a further 1.2 million budget in the MTFP for new projects which have not yet been taken to the Combined Authority Board for approval to spend. So that's projects that have been agreed to be progressed but still remain in the subject to approval lines. There are currently no other material variations in the revenue budget. The capital budget again is up to the period, the 8-month period up to 30th of November 2021. The key points on this is that the capital programme outturn shows a 2.6 million positive variance against the approved budget for the following reasons. The A10 junctions joining OBC, delays and the need to look at scoping that and reprofiling that budget. Soham Station, this project is currently being delivered ahead of schedule. It has in fact opened to the public now, and that's a great success. And but we are now in the, although it's open for service, we have contractual closure and snagging and that sort of things to deal with. Coldham's Lane, this project is currently on hold at the committee's request while funding is sought to bridge a budget gap for the options the committee considered offered best value for money. I think later down in one of the annexes, it probably shows that, well, maybe not in the dashboard, it shows that Coldham's Lane is now classed as red. We kept it at green, but at the Transport Programme Board, as part of our governance, we discussed it and said, look, it's red because it's not moving forwards and a budget hasn't been identified with it. And that needs some discussion, I think, within the committee as to how we take that forwards. The A1260 Neem Parkway Junction 15, 250,000 additional budget was required due to the further design surveys, and that went through committee and board recently. A605 Stanground Woodsea Access Phase 2 budget approved to cover an expected overspend on the project. Following a lower than estimated final account settlement, the budget is no longer required. That's a good positive. Transport modelling, this project is being developed and likely to be completed in 2022, 2023, hence the reduction in forecast spend for the current year. There will be a future paper coming forwards in regards to transport modelling and in particular data gathering, data, central data source. CAM Investments operating business cases, a paper to Combined Authority Board recommending the closure of one CAM was approved by the board in October. There is a 28.6 million 2021-22 budget still subject to board approval. This is being reviewed as part of the overall review. The Transforming Cities Fund programme reported to the September T&I committee, and there will be a future paper coming forwards on that. Performance reporting, the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough devolution deal is about delivering better economic outcomes for the people of our area and commits us to specific results. The combined authority needs to monitor how well is it doing that. Appendix 1 shows the transport performance dashboard, includes an update on the delivery against the following growth outcomes set by the devolution deal: prosperity, GVA, housing and jobs. The appendix also includes indicators relating to the transport programme chosen by the committee to supplement the corporate headline indicators. The board in January will consider future performance reporting arrangements in support of the new business plan and medium-term financial plan. Performance metrics are also being reviewed as part of the local transport and connectivity plan. Following this, we will be proposing adoption of new metrics to the Transport and Infrastructure Committee with a stronger outcome focus. The project RAG ratings continue to be updated monthly as part of our standard management processes, and the appendix also includes ratings for the combined authorities transport project based on outturn data from the end of December. If we look at Appendix 1, the performance dashboard, the reference that I made earlier, we've currently got the A10 OBC as amber, but this committee's had a paper to push that forwards, so we will hope to get that returning to green very shortly. And it's not showing on here, but Coldham's Lane is the red one, which again, we've had that on our register for a while, and it's a question as to how that's taken forward, and recommendations may come from this committee. And I commend it to the committee.
Thank you. Well done on that one. And hopefully we'll be able to ask all the difficult questions that are about to come. Obviously the concern that we got a red one, but as you say, we've got to work out how we move forward on that one. So I open up to committee members. Councillor Shaler.
Coldham's Lane is actually in my division, and I was going to ask anyway. It says here that while funding is sought, I would love if you have it, any kind of update on where are we seeking funding for that project. There are other things around Coldham's Lane as well. There's a lot of development. There is the idea of lowering the roadway under the rail bridge to allow double-decker buses and things. So there's quite a lot around Coldham's Lane, but I presume we're talking about the Sainsbury's roundabout specifically, but there's also cycle lanes on that. So if any update would be appreciated.
I suppose my only commentary here would be that we debated that. It is the roundabout that you mentioned, and we debated it at length. There were some designs, and unfortunately the designs were challenged, and more improved designs were proposed, but it did increase the budget considerably. We sought additional funding support from other partners, and at that time that funding support wasn't available, etc. There is a budget prioritisation exercise ongoing at the moment, and I know that Cambridgeshire County Council have put forward bids for that. I can't confirm, but I would imagine Coldham's Lane should have been one of those or a consideration. But the question will be, and I think we need a discussion between officers and possibly ourselves, Councillor Shaler, in terms of Cambridgeshire County Council's views on what needs to be done at that roundabout, and therefore whether a further report needs to come back to this committee with a proposal.
I was double tapping there. As I looked up, I had two hands up, so I'll go down the right direction. Councillor Gough first.
Just a comment. I'm just looking at the very last page, 242, and it looks like some of the data on there is pretty long in the tooth, I think. Maybe we could have a look next time at sort of updating that, so we've got sort of fatalities on our roads like November 2019, which is over 2 years ago. Some of the data 18-19 as well. I think it's probably time for a refresh of that page.
I think you're right. I think Roland's probably going to say the difficulty is actually that the data are utilised from those particular periods, aren't they?
Yeah, it's data from a national source, and it is delayed somewhat, unfortunately. But I will take it back to the analyst team and see if there is a way of, but I think you'll find that we're taking it from a reliable data source that is published, and it's the time it takes for that to be updated when the latest hasn't yet come through. But I take your point.
And I think the point is it can be extremely frustrating when you're looking at other areas which might be a lot higher up if you were to take current data. Councillor Robertson.
I was looking at the table on revenue budget, paragraph 3.2. Here we are 3/4 of the way through the year, and the budget of 16 million, only 6.7 has been spent. I'm just questioning whether we're actually going to achieve the forecast that the officers have put forward, particularly on things like the bus concessionary fares and the bus improvements implementation, bus review implementation. I'm just questioning, I mean, you may not know the answer today because your technical colleague's not here, but if we could have the answer in due course, that would be great.
I'll happily come back, Chair, if that's okay. I can give you the answer I would expect my technical colleague to give, and I can absolutely take it on board to come back with a response. This table, as stated, takes to the 8-month period, 30th November. A lot of this, if you take concessionary fares and what have you, we're doing it based on invoices coming in effectively and the time period of receiving those and then paying them back out. So there is often a period of delay within that, and we have got data that is 2 or 3 months behind. So at this moment, at the moment that this was written, that was what we had, but at this moment that may already have changed slightly, but I'll try and get you more accurate data.
No, fine, if the forecast is accurate, that's the important thing.
Yeah.
Anything else? I see no up. So Councillor Shayler again.
Yes, one of the items I see there is the Wisbech station, and it just so happened that while we were opening the Soham station, we were chatting with Network Rail, and there were various options about different sorts of rail. I trust that heavy rail is still on the agenda. It would be great if we had any sort of update on the timing for that extension.
I think we can have a brief one on that one.
Brief one. So yeah, Wisbech Rail, the latest was that we had funding to engage with Network Rail for them to review our business case and provide us with a number of reports. We've had one of those reports in. Heavy rail and light rail have been a consideration. We're also now just waiting the latest report, which is the modelling report, and it is proposed that papers come forward in March in relation to proposal to go next stage.
That's useful. Sounds like it's moving on at a pace, should we say? I see no other indications to anybody wishing to speak. So the recommendation is the Transport and Infrastructure Committee is recommended to note the January budget performance monitoring update. All noted. Happy to do that. Thank you very much. So that moves on to the finale. And thank you for all those here, committee members, and all those tuning in. And if you'd like to tune in for the next update, the next meeting is on the Transport and Infrastructure Committee meeting is scheduled for the 14th of March 2022. I'm not sure of the location, but I'm sure we'll be advised of it. So thank you all very much, members. Councillor Seaton.
Thank you, Chair. Just like to raise a couple of points. One, which has been raised, was Rail, but just referring to comments made about the A10 and the very good rail services there already. Just from going from Peterborough from west to east, of course, there are no direct rail links, and the A47 is inadequate for the amount of traffic that goes by. Now, I know that I've had talks with Mr. Potter about this in the past, that discussions have gone on with Highways England. But you know, I want 2022 to continue as I did in 2021, and that's pushing for you know, alternative measures for the A47 and also rail links as well, because we have neither really of any note going from Peterborough across to the coast even. There is an indirect rail link via March, but it's a fairly tortuous route round to King's Lynn. So, you know, I want to make this so that it does appear on our on future meetings, so that we can have an update. I know it's not going to happen tomorrow, but unless I keep pushing for it, and it's not just for a better road, it's actually to open up the economic opportunities, because in Fenland and also from across the board, the economic opportunities would benefit, I believe, all parties. So, you know, I want to keep this on the agenda. I would like to push and get feedback at the following meetings. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, just drop in. Rather than Roland respond to a point which is outside of an agenda item, perhaps Roland could pick up directly with Councillor Seaton.
That's fine. Thank you for that. We're just ensuring it does keep there. So
Thank you very much.
Going back to my previous one, the date of the next meeting for all those tuning in or otherwise, or being physically present, will be the 14th of March 2022. And thank you very much. Have a safe, pleasant journey home by whatever means of transport you utilise.
Thank you, Chair.